meeting looking at the 2018 operating budget. And for the record, we have councilpersons Somerville, Fusco, Hoke, Samples, Neal, Milkovich, Swirsky, have I missed anyone? And Freeman. Okay, we will commence, and I'm going to ask if we could, I think we'd like to hear from the mayor right now.
Oh, thank you. I wanted to start off your budget hearings, a couple of things. First, budgets are a plan, and they are a roadmap as to how we get there. And to clear up any misconceptions, I wanted council leadership to know, council president and all of council, we will always be faithful to the promises that we made during that campaign to raise the income tax when it comes to the third funding. And literally, I have literally gone through this budget line item by line item at least a half a dozen times, looking for augmented savings, possible revenue, and we will always, on a daily basis, continue to drive down revenue, drive up revenue, and drive down expenses to be able to meet those. And the goal, I have the utmost confidence that we will be able to meet our goal of not being able to go into reserves, given that. But like I said, when we go out with the document, and it is 183 pages or 85 pages, it is just not numbers on a piece of paper. They are continually worked by department, and had a meeting with the M-level managers about a month ago, and to look at that very line item, which line items are you looking at to be able to augment, and which line items are we looking to reduce when it comes to labor and expenses. And so it's just not a document that sits on a table. It is a living, breathing document that we continue to try to augment. So I wanted all of you, each of you, to know that as we do that plan, but there are plans and roadmaps to be able to get to the end of the year. And so I wanted to make sure I reiterated that today as you kick off with the mayor's office and go from there. So I appreciate the few extra minutes of time that you're able to take to listen to this, but we'll remain committed and faithful to those promises we made. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Madam President, thank you.
So we're going to be hearing from the mayor's office today, and then from the legislative branch, and also from our public safety folk. So we will begin. Who'll be speaking for us first?
That would be me, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Hardy, thank you.
So, thank you to members of the committee, members of council, council president. Annie McFadden and I are here to present the mayor's office budget. We will be going through 0101 all the way through 0111 if you're looking at your budget documents. Police Auditor Phil Young is here to handle 0110. So we can do that maybe a little bit out of order if it pleases the group. But the first thing we'd like to do is go over the city's 2018 strategy map, which is the basis for a lot of not only what we have in the mayor's office budget, but the budget in general. So I know we passed it out. I believe you also have it in your tablets, but I just want to make sure. Okay. Okay. So first thing I would say is that believe me when I say we didn't make the type font so small on purpose as to be devious. It's just that's the way it came out. So I'm happy to read through it. Yeah. So this should not be unfamiliar to council members. We've been using this format since coming to office. It has evolved and strengthened as we've gotten further along. And so for this year, we're focused on four key strategic priorities: increased economic opportunity, improved public life, stronger neighborhoods, and operational efficiency. We then have enterprise goals and enterprise progress indicators and metrics under each of those. I'm going to very quickly touch on a few, but we are happy to answer any questions you may have about individual items. Under the first strategic priority, increased economic opportunity, a lot of these things the mayor discussed in his State of the City, and are continuations of things that we have begun in the first 2 years. I would point to a few. One is the City County Chamber Strategic Planning, of which I am a part of the work group, and as well as the mayor. We will be working on strategic priorities together in 2018, which will have an impact on what the city's role is in economic development going forward. We continue to prioritize entrepreneurship and innovation, which we've talked a lot about. Financial empowerment is very familiar to council, as is our continuing efforts to raise and support educational attainment. We hope to have Stark State College Akron opening this year soon, but there's a lot more we need to do, and our partnership with the Akron Public Schools is only growing. We continue to work with the Akron Growth Council as the mayor's sounding board for how we organize as a city around economic development, and that's the one thing, again, I would point out under the metrics for that goal, which is integrating the city development functions, which you heard the mayor announce at the State of the City. So the Office of Integrated Development will take time to build, but effectively, as of now, I have line responsibility for planning economic development and elements of engineering, namely Michelle DiFiore, who is the Environmental Services Manager in the Bureau, but she's also our liaison to the Office of Integrated Development for Engineering. So she is sort of our go-between, our chief liaison, if you will, with engineering, but they're very much a part of our planning. We will be working for a full year, I would say certainly for the next 6 to 9 months, to develop that office, both budgetarily and strategically. We welcome the input of council. I've already talked with council leadership about finding appropriate times for myself and our team to come and present, whether that be at a retreat or a committee meeting. And if anyone has any questions or concerns about how that's going or where that intends to go, I'm here to answer those, and we can do that today or certainly offline because it's an evolving process. Under improved public life, again, a lot of this is a continuation of things that we have begun, improving city-owned public spaces. We have a lot that we want to do and accomplish around our parks in particular, but also our streets. That goes into the Great Streets Initiative coming out of OID, or Office of Integrated Development. We're going to continue to engage directly with Akron residents through the Citizens Institute and other opportunities, through the mayor's town halls and digital town halls that we have planned. We continue to support public art, and Annie is better equipped at answering those questions, but we do have that exciting reveal of some new Welcome to Akron signs coming up next month, or this month? This month. And we also are prioritizing inclusive mobility or complete streets planning. So the council has taken a leadership role on this, Councilman Swirsky and others. We hope to convene the Complete Streets Commission, bring names to the council very soon. We have some exciting opportunities around integrated development to really look at transportation planning, not just from the car, but from the people perspective of all modalities, and look at our neighborhoods. That's going to be done through Great Streets, it's going to be done through grant work, it's going to be done through a complete streets planning process. So that's something that we've prioritized for this year to really get moving on that, and to pick up the great work that's already begun. Stronger neighborhoods, we hope to improve road conditions, namely by paving 54 miles of road this year instead of the regular 16, and getting a handle on it and really starting to do 5-year transportation planning again, so we can start to bring in more grant dollars and really maximize the issue 4 dollars. Improve public safety infrastructure, that speaks for itself with Station 2, Station 12, and other capital improvements that we'll be making through issue 4. We continue to prioritize housing and implementing the Planning to Grow Akron report, which we talked about. We are now at implementation phase of the Downtown Vision and Redevelopment Plan, which is very critical. And I want to applaud Council President Somerville. She's been right there the whole way with Downtown Plan, and it is going to take a group effort to figure out how we can increase capacity to achieve the kind of activity we want to see downtown. But we have some great projects in the pipeline that are moving forward. We want to prioritize our neighborhood business districts. We will do this through the Great Streets Initiative, and to continue to promote health equity through the work of Tamika Rose and the Health Equity Ambassador. And finally, operational efficiency, which has not changed since we've come to office. We continue to try to enhance and grow revenue, control our expenses, look for opportunities to leverage city assets, consolidation where appropriate, and use technology to improve our operations. We want to appropriately monetize assets, and we've had that conversation. That conversation continues. And obviously a global goal of reducing the overall cost of the CSOs. So again, there's a lot more I could go into depth, and we're here to answer those questions. As it relates to the budget itself, I'm happy to answer questions on the numbers. The only things that I would point out before opening it up to questions, handing it over to Annie to talk about the communications budget this year. The Mayor's Office Administration and the communications budget will reflect the cabinet reductions that the mayor announced over a month ago. As it relates to economic development, the only reason we had an increase was because we added the innovation and entrepreneurship advocate, Heather Roschek, who is here behind me, to work on entrepreneurship and small business activity. Otherwise, it's essentially a flat budget. Everything is essentially down except for that. We continue to work to realign economic development activities based upon not only the Blue Ribbon Task Force, but the work of the Growth Council and the work now of integrated development to more of a local focus. So the ADC budget and the economic development JED budget is really more devoted this year than ever to supporting Bounce and supporting local business activity, and less, far less, on international business attraction and consultants thereof. Lock 3 continues to do outstanding work with less. We've been able to find savings again this year and look to again beat the budget while still maintaining a high level of programming. There's some exciting things that we have planned to try and augment the programming that the city of Akron provides through some partnerships with some concert promoters that could do market rate concerts that would fit in Lock 3, that would bring in revenue not only for the city, but would also offer another opportunity for people outside of the city subsidized concerts to come down and enjoy entertainment. We are also working very hard to augment our festival calendar because of the Tiger Project. So for the next 2 years, Main Street will obviously be impacted. Luckily, this summer there won't be a huge impact to the festivals, but certainly the next summer we're already planning now to make sure that whether it's Red, White, and Blue, the Italian Festival, we're adding an Irish Festival this year, as well as the African American Festival, are made as whole as possible by coming into the park. So through reimagining the Civic Commons, the work that we're doing, and the work that the community is doing around downtown, there are a lot of wonderful things on the horizon for Lock 3 and Lock 4. And so I will pass it off to Annie to go through communications, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, James. With regards to communications, I think the city has done a really good job over the past couple years in really expanding the way we communicate to residents. Mayor has done town halls, as you know. We've greatly expanded our social presence online. We started an e-newsletter. Last year we were able to do a city magazine that went to all city residents just to expand who we were speaking to. With that, we've definitely reduced our budget this year. Obviously the biggest line item is reduction in staff. So the mayor's office has just absorbed a lot of those communication duties. So we're really focused this year on utilizing as many free assets as possible, as many digital assets as possible, really focusing on earned media as well, anything we can do to keep up those communications with obviously spending less money. So the budget, is pretty lean and mean as much as we can get, and it pretty much speaks for itself, but the biggest would be the reduction in staff, and we'll be doing some form of city magazine hopefully this year. We got a great response to that, but it will be digital, and we'll be doing it in-house, so we won't have a big expenditure there as well. So, and again, just trying to capitalize on all free services we can possibly do in terms of e-news and social and platforms like that. So. And then
Police Auditor Young said I could go ahead and just go through his, which is essentially a flat budget. So he's here. We're all here to answer questions. And with that, turn it back over to the chairman.
Questions or comments as pertains to the budget items we have before us here? Anything we've heard thus far? Mr. Neal?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, I'm behind on getting my information up,
okay.
So I'll probably have some questions later. But on some of the things that you stated, I just have a couple questions. One was the opportunity to monetize assets. Back when we were talking about the cell towers, we had talked about getting a list of those assets that the city presently has. that have the opportunity to create some type of creative revenue stream, as well as those that we may already have some public-private partnerships that we may want to relook at those agreements.
Okay.
I mean, there are some, like, the mayor commissioned the Park and Rec Committee to look at some of the contracts. And so, like, I know we have some agreements with some of the golf courses, the soccer field, we're looking at those things. But on a much bigger note, you know, looking at some other items, do we have that list yet where we could take a look at those potential things?
Not a comprehensive list, we can do that. Oftentimes, the asset sort of makes itself aware that it's monetizable. That's not a word,
Okay.
but you know what I'm getting at.
Right.
I can share with you that the things we're looking at this year include through the recreation strategic plan. As you know, part of, I think, why the mayor wanted the Parks and Rec Advisory Board to start looking at those contracts is because our parkland is valuable, not from a development perspective necessarily, but it could be a revenue generator for recreation. You could RFP for a hot dog stand or for a cafe or things like that, or a vendor to do roller skating or something like that. So there are ways in which other cities have monetized that asset in order to generate revenue back to the city for recreation services. That's one potential thing that might come up in the rec strategic plan. Another thing we're looking at is the watershed. It was identified in the Blue Ribbon Task Force. We're going through a feasibility study right now because we don't want to presume what the value might be. But a conservation easement program, where you both preserve land and the watershed while also monetizing the asset through the sale of an easement, preservation easement, conservation easement back to the city. Those are things we're looking at, so we hope to bring that to council this year in terms of what the results are of that. And the last thing that I think is definitely on the, is already out there is the city center building. So the YWCA, which is not long, but has been owned by the city for, I'm not sure how long. Long? You know, we fill up maybe less than half of it, and it's right along a strategic spine with the Bowery District coming alive. And so we've had an RFP publicly out on the street that just closed at the end of last month. So there might be a possibility where that could be developed, and we could either stay as a tenant or sell the building outright. So those are three things that are on the agenda right now, but we could definitely work to try and put together a brainstorm sheet of like what could be monetized so that you kind of have it on the horizon. But I share with you those three things that are actively being considered right now.
Okay. That would be helpful for us to get
Okay.
a holistic understanding of what revenue streams we have potentially available to us. The one that comes to mind are the folks, Councilman Sworsky and I believe Ms. Sims, it falls under, and now Ms. Councilwoman Samples, the folks that came down about the forestry, the trees off on the watershed. They were saying we could get some types of credits for those.
Those would be the conservation easements, yes.
Okay, all righty, okay. The other thing is, you mentioned Lock 3, and last year we had talked about, just from an operations standpoint, upgrading the way we take payments. Have we secured, be it one of the score or?
I want to say we kept that in the budget this year for Lock 3 to look at a new point of sale, not necessarily a full-fledged point of sale system, but the ability to take credit cards and better track and itemize. Yes, we did contemplate that in the Lock 3 budget this year. I believe it stayed in.
At another time, can we get the breakdown on revenue like we got last year?
Yeah, so we haven't purchased anything yet, but once we get that in place, I'm happy to share with you what we've shared in the past, but once we upgrade whatever that software is, be happy to share that.
And then last but not least, you mentioned market rate promoters. At some time, can you share that with us? Because the one thing that I want to make sure, because we get requests, just like you, all the time for different acts down at Lock 3. And different promoters have different niches.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that we're being, for lack culturally sensitive
Yes.
in that area to make sure that we have promoters that can?
Yes, so we definitely are, and we will continue to subsidize community programming to make sure that we always have a diverse offering down at Lock 3. And as I was happy to share with you, partnering with Reimagining the Civic Commons has granted the Akron Civic Theater and Lock 3 the opportunity to do community engagement this year around what types of things do you like about Lock 3, what do you want to see at Lock 3, as we look to maybe reimagine that space. So I'm also hopeful that this year we'll have some good feedback in terms of what are we doing well. Clearly we're doing a lot well. We brought down over 2 million people downtown between Canal Park, Lock 3, Lock 4, and other programming last year in festivals. That's tremendous. But we can always do things differently. We want to make sure that downtown's for everybody. So hopefully we will have that data to share with you this year as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The questions, comments? Thank you very, very much. Did I miss someone? Oh, Mr. Kilby, I'm sorry.
Okay, over chair, if you don't mind. Anyways, James, I was going over, you broke down the different parts of the mayor's office. I was mostly interested in full-time employees. I was adding them up, 16, 17. How many are there? I got 19. I got up to the police auditor. What was after that?
Are you including all of these pages?
Yeah.
So that would be, that's including economic development. Lock 3, there's 3, pardon me. Lock 3, there's 3. There are 0 in communications now. 0 full-time employees and peacemakers. 8 in the administration. And that includes secretarial staff as well. 1 in public safety, which is Deputy Mayor Brown.
Okay.
None in the Holocaust Memorial Trust, none in Jet Econ ADC, 8 in economic development, which is the lowest staffing levels we've ever had in that office. We at one point had 17 people in the economic development department, and none in Jet Econ, none in the revolving loan fund.
Okay. I noticed the Lock 3 is funded by the JED. Is that money from the JED revenue earmarked for certain things? Does it have to go to certain things? I can't remember. The money from the JED, what is that earmarked for?
I'm going to pass that one off to finance.
Yeah, that's earmarked for, it's a combination of money that goes back to the general fund and economic development and community events initiatives.
Okay. Anyways, yeah, I think Lock 3 brings in money to the city. That's a money maker. 3 employees, I don't know. Who are the 3 employees? What do they do?
So Tish Jernigan, who's here today, is the downtown operations manager. So she does things even outside of Lock 3 and Lock 4. We have Chris Griffith, who is a rec supervisor? Yeah. And then Greg Obringer, a rec supervisor? So 2 rec supervisors, Chris Griffith and Greg Obringer, and then seasonals.
Okay. Is there any activities in the wintertime for Lock 3?
Yes, so for the last 15 years, we've done Winterfest.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yep.
I forgot. The ice skating and all that stuff? Yep. Okay. Yeah. Anyways, yeah, I think on this part of the page, the most important part is the last one, operation efficiency. Now, one of your goals is to control expenses. Now, labor is one of the biggest expenses. Since we're facing well, the mayor just said he's confident we can weather through this budget without having to tap into the rainy fund, but we didn't last year. We had to tap into it. So I was just wondering if we get like halfway through the year, would the administration be willing to at least, I know we negotiated pay raises with our bargaining units, but traditionally everyone else gets a raise too. But would I guess the question is, would the administration entertain the thought of freezing the pay raise, not taking the pay raise for 2019? I think council probably would agree to do that.
I can't speak for the mayor on that, but I could say, the only thing I would say to that is I don't think there's anything that won't be discussed. I can't see
I
the
think
mayor
that's
ever
something
taking
we
anything
should
off the table.
consider, because, you know, when we get halfway through the year, we'll have a better idea what the revenue's going to be. It doesn't seem to be pouring in that well, from what I can tell. And another thing, it doesn't show up in this stuff, and I've always thought about this over the years, like the expense of having city cars. How many people in the mayor's office total get a car that they can take home at night?
I can get that for you.
Okay. So that's something that maybe we can look at, cut back on that if it seems to be too much, and pay people mileage.
If I could interject, I know that one of the budgets within your economic development, they did give up one of their pool cars this year. So we are looking to, and I believe planning as well has given up some cars. So that is something that we are aware of, that we're looking at.
I'd like to know, James, how many city cars are taken home, and who are the people that take them home? All right?
Okay.
Thank
But
you.
let me just go back to something you said. We did not tap into the rainy day fund last year. No, we actually added to our rainy day fund.
Okay, well, I guess I misspoke then, but we didn't put 5 million in like we were supposed to.
Probably about 4.8 though.
Okay, so indirectly, we didn't use it all for its intended purposes because we had to balance the budget, I guess, so.
Yeah, but
is that
again,
accurate?
we added 82% to the rainy day fund, and the general fund balance is the biggest it's ever been.
Yeah, but it was supposed to be 100%, wasn't it?
We could
Wasn't
go
that
back
the
and forth on
amendment we
that.
got when
We
we?
did talk about that again, and I'm happy to discuss it offline, but
Okay.
again, it was the largest it's ever been.
Okay.
And the goal is to continue to grow it. As the mayor said, everything that I presented today is a plan, and it's dependent on revenues. And
I know.
so we will continue to look at that, and this is what we want to do, but we will do what we have to do to make sure that we meet budget.
All right, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Milkovich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Following up on Mr. Kilby's excellent point about the city cars, is there any way that we can get a number of the fuel consumption for the year for these cars that are,
I'll work with
Take it
public
home.
service, try and get you something.
thank you.
Mr. Swirsky.
I'm sure not introducing the idea to you, but considering our financial condition, considering the givebacks that we've done recently with our retired employees, and considering the most important fact, which is a lot of the people that we represent have very high health care costs or no health care. And so I'd like to see us take a look at a little give back in the area of health care costs. I know council people would probably be willing to pay a little bit more to maintain their health care, and I think all city employees starting at the top ought to do that. I mean, our health care system is kind of based on the old manufacturers' unions' strength, and the government's followed it, but the public at large, the citizens who we represent, don't have that same ability or same opportunity to pay very, very little for their health care. And so I would really like to see that on the table, and I think that that would be something pretty profound at reducing the costs of our overhead in our operating budget. And I would like to see that as one of the first things you take a look at. And I'm pretty confident that council people would be a little bit flexible, willing to work in that area, thinking about the people that they represent and their constituents and the status that they're in terms of their health care.
Thank you, Mr. Milkovich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hardy, here's another thought. My experience now at the State House, we were not provided state-issue cell phones. Is there a number that we can have that the cost of city-issue cell phones?
Sure,
We can
and
take a look
that
at.
extends far beyond the mayor's office. But one of the things we have looked at with IT and trying to improve our IT capabilities is a bring-your-own-device policy. It's just something that we haven't been able to get to yet because we were having trouble crawling before we could start walking, but the idea is we're getting better. I think we have improved, and it's definitely something that we want to look at this year in earnest, because other places have gone to a bring your own device policy. There are apps. There is an expense to it, but there is an app that can really capture the public record, so you don't have to worry about your personal life and the public record and all of that, which is a concern of a lot of employees. They want to keep the two separate. I mean, that's all right. But it's definitely something that we want to look at.
Okay, thank you. Let me go to Ms. Moby, and then I'll come back to you, Mr. Neal.
When we look at Fire Safer in 2015,
Say that again, I'm sorry.
the Fire Safer, is it operating budget, city of,
What page are you referring to?
am I too far gone?
Fire's coming up.
Oh,
I'm not that good.
thank you.
Chief Tucker's better at that.
That's all right, I'm too far down. I'll get to it. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Couple things that came to mind. One was, when we spoke of Lot 3, you mentioned that there were two persons that were park and recreation coordinators?
They're classified as rec supervisors, but they're not in the rec department.
Okay, so that their salaries or their wages come out of the administration budget, or do they come out of the park and recreation budget?
They come out of our administration, well, the Lock 3 part of our administration budget. They're not in rec.
Okay. Because if I can relate to a question we had yesterday, when we were looking at the shortfall, raised a question about, that's when we looked at dipping into the cash reserves, and a statement was made yesterday. I want to make sure I understand that we could not use the water funds to cover some of those expenses. But when we got at the end of the budget and we recognized the $16 million shortfall, we said that we were going to use water funds, money from the water funds to cover that. So I need clarification on what we meant by that, because one of the things I wanted to ask was, the administrative hours that are used to work on CSO projects and things related to the water fund, are they charged to the water fund, or are they charged to the are they showing up in the operating budget, or are they showing up in the water fund budget?
We do, so if there are costs that are related, for instance, to the CSO projects, those are being charged to the sewer fund, even if they are performed by people within the administration. So, we have a portion of our service director that is actually charged off to the sewer fund. So we are looking to allocate those costs to the appropriate funds when we have people that are traditionally just part of the administration and have traditionally been charged to the general fund, performing those tasks that are for other activities like CSO, like things in water. And in the instance we're talking about here, the recreation supervisors are performing Lock 3 functions, so they're charged to the Lock 3 JED budget that exists within the mayor's office.
And the only other thing I would add is, so when the mayor works on sewer, when I work on sewer, we don't charge to the sewer fund, we're charged to admin.
What about when, like Mr. Fricker or Ms. Miller-Dawson, when they work on things related to that, be it for bond funding or anything like that, those hours are charged, are they charged to administration, or are they charged to?
Well, one of the things, the other thing I will say is that we do allocate some costs from the sewer fund, the water fund, all of the enterprise funds. We do transfer some costs or some revenues back to the general fund for a variety of services performed by individuals within the general fund. For instance, the law department does work for the water and sewer fund. So there is a transfer of cost appropriate within the policy that we have from what we call the proprietary funds, which are our enterprise and internal service funds, back to the general fund. So we are capturing those those expenses within the water and sewer funds that are performed by general fund personnel.
Okay. For our benefit, if we can get a record of all the funds and what their balances are, because like when we asked yesterday, there was a steam plant, but that's not in the operating budget. There were some other funds that aren't in the operating budget, so that we can get a total understanding, because what comes before us is the capital budget and the operating budget. If there are funds that aren't showing up in these budgets, then we're not going to be aware of them. So if we can get a list of every fund and what its balance is, so that we have a true picture, because yesterday, when we looked and we saw that there was like a $16 million shortfall at the end, and then the comment was made, well, it's going to be made up for with the money out of the water fund. That confused me, because earlier we had asked, the statement said, well, we can't mix these funds. So if that's going to be paid for, so
Just,
please.
I would like to
Go ahead.
elaborate on that, because I don't believe we ever said that we were going to make up a shortfall with money out of the water
Okay, well,
fund.
clarify it for me, because we had that $16 million, there is that $16 million that shortfall, and it was stated that that was going to be made up with what fund? Because I must have misheard you.
I think you misunderstood what I said, and I'm happy to
okay.
talk about it offline.
This comment was made inside the
It
chamber.
was
So there
made.
was a $16 million shortfall.
Yes, we were looking at the total
Okay, so
of
how's it gonna be made
expenditures
up?
and revenue. And I said that we were spending sewer balance to cover sewer. That's what I said. Because if you look at the numbers, we are spending sewer fund balance to cover sewer expenses.
Okay, sewer expenses that are in the operating budget?
No, that are in sewer operating.
Okay, so the revenue isn't showing up, but the expenses are showing up in the budget. I mean, help me. One of my main responsibilities as a council person is to understand this budget so that I could be the best trustee of the city's assets as possible. $16 million in expenses are showing up in the operating budget, but the revenue isn't.
Okay, let me see if I can explain this in pretty simple terms. So the sewer fund is a fund that exists on its own. Obviously,
Okay.
we have high costs now because we're doing the CSO projects. So last year, we are borrowing money to fund the CSO projects through the loans that we get through the Water Pollution Loan Control Fund. We did a lot of drawdowns of those bond proceeds last year. This year, there won't be as many, so the revenues will be lower within the sewer fund. So the sewer fund balance will go down, but the change in that balance is only related to the sewer fund. It's not because there's other funds that are being impacted by that drawdown of funds, if that makes sense. So basically, we're going to draw down the balance in the sewer fund because we're taking in less revenue this year.
Okay, and that part I understand, because that's the way I understood it yesterday. But these expenses, the $16 million that's showing up as a shortfall, is that related to the sewer fund?
I think what I was talking about was looking at sewer and how much we budgeted for revenue versus the expenses. Again, there was like a difference. That money is coming from the sewer fund balance. That's what I was trying to say.
That part I understood, and that part I understood, but that $16 million shortfall, what is that related to?
See, I don't know what you're talking about then.
Okay. Page 6. Well, the first part is $1 million, but then yesterday when we were talking about the $60 million shortfall, Councilwoman Sims had asked the original question, and we said that money was going to be made up with basically, if you look at what's budgeted and what's Yeah, for expenses and revenue, there's like a $16 million.
And I think what
16,
what we're
17
saying is that the largest component for that drop that you're speaking of is from the sewer fund. So that's the primary responsibility for,
Okay, so now I follow you there. So let me ask this question. The drop is because those expenses are showing up in here, correct? Those expenses are, that difference is because of those expenses showing up in this budget, correct?
the difference is because there are funds that we are showing more expenses than revenues.
Okay, but since we can't mix the sewer
Each fund is its own entity.
Okay, so let me just ask you, are those expenses showing up in this budget? Is that what's showing us creating the shortfall?
Those expenses you're referring to,
The expenses to the sewer fund. Because since we can't use those dollars for anything except for CSO project-based expenses, my understanding is then that those expenses, since we're going to use those dollars to pay them down, are showing up in the operating.
But are you referring to the grand total on the page? Is that what you're referring to? The grand total at the bottom of the page?
Okay, when we look at what's budgeted for revenue.
Grand total.
And when we look at what's budgeted for expenses, correct, grand total, there's that, what we spoke about yesterday, there was that 16 to 17 million dollar shortfall. I'm trying to get an understanding, okay? That shortfall, yesterday the comment was made that we were going to make up that shortfall using dollars from.
See, I was referring to sewer only.
Okay.
The sewer is the biggest portion that looks out of balance.
Okay,
but
so
we're-
those expenses are in here.
Those expenses are there, but we're
Okay, now
using
let-
sewer fund balance. They have a
Okay.
cash balance that we'll be using, drawing down to
Okay.
pay the
So
expenses.
let me ask you this, so the expenses are in here, is the revenue in here?
The revenue is in the sewer fund balance.
Okay, so see, that's what throws us off, because the expenses for the sewer fund are in here, but the revenue isn't.
Yes, they are.
The
There's two
revenue-
pages. There's page 5 is revenues, and page 6 is expenditures.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct, but there's a $17 million shortfall.
Okay. If you think of your checkbook, if you start with the beginning balance,
Okay,
your paychecks go in, that's your revenue.
right,
You have expenses that come out, your
Right.
expenses. End of the day, you have balance.
correct.
I think the piece you're missing is that beginning. So current year, and Diane's example of sewer was a perfect example. Sewer has a nice beginning balance. So even though the current year revenue is going to be less than the current year expense, we're drawing down fund balance.
Okay.
Because your checkbook doesn't always balance
Yeah,
out to zero.
I understand that portion.
Yeah.
But when you give us something trying to show us a budget, and you're showing a $17 million shortfall, well, then give us the beginning balance. Don't put the expenses in here and not put the revenue in there.
Okay, so the revenue's there, so it's a beginning balance.
Okay, which is not showing up in this
Okay.
information. So it gives us a distorted picture. That's not making sense?
Well, I think I understand what you're asking for.
Okay. Yeah, what I'm asking for is a clear understanding of the city's financial position. And then when I look at this right here, this document says that we're falling $17 million short. And I'm told that we cannot mix funds. We can't mix revenue streams. But yet the expenses for one revenue stream is showing up in here. So,
Mr. Chair, let me ask, Mr. Chair, may I? This
Yes.
is a question related to that.
okay, thank you, go ahead.
Are we looking at 5005 for sewer on the revenue and 5005 on the expense?
I think the example I was trying to give did take into account both of those, but again, the beginning cash balance is the piece that's not here. Because when I say we're drawing cash balance, we are drawing cash balance. Sewer has a hefty cash balance.
Which I would never presume to speak for service, but I would be, just because of being involved in the project, this was always the plan. So I think I understand, just for my own purposes, what you're asking for, but this is not an alarming thing. We've been building fund balance for this inevitability when debt becomes due, when projects are coming due. This was always part of the plan, but I think I understand what you're asking for that would be helpful. But I just want to interject that this is not something that wasn't anticipated. This is exactly according to how this financial picture was going to go with CSOs.
Yes,
So if we could get an understanding of what that balance is, that'd give us a more accurate picture of what's available, what our position is. Maybe it's not as drastic as this makes it look. And then the other thing I wanted to ask about was the technology piece. I know when we had made the switch of moving our technology department over to the county, we had talked about taking a look at that to see, since some aspects of technology are now being looked at as true assets for communities. I mean, our neighbors in Fairlawn, you know, they're offering broadband as a utility. Can we get an update on where we are on looking at the potential of that? And just from a personal piece, how effective has it been with us switching over to our technology department over to the county? Because I had a personal experience just this past week.
Good or bad?
It was a bad one because I called. I needed help with my cell phone. My cell phone wasn't working. And I got one of their folks, and they were saying, well, we don't do that. And so I got switched. And so is that delay. And I know that's just a small piece, but when you look at the asset of owning that technology and being able to parlay that into different revenue streams,
sure,
that's what makes me bring that up.
Sure. So I wouldn't take my word for it. I would ask our managers and other cabinet members, but partnering with the county has been a tremendous asset for us. And I want to differentiate between two things. There's smart city Internet of Things activities, which I think is what you're referring to around asset-based technology. And there's the everyday, my computer's broken, my phone doesn't work type of IT. So let me take that part first. Partnering with the county has been tremendous, although we are reevaluating that because we think we can do more together. But we have not just partnered with the county, we've elevated folks internally who are fantastic into leadership roles to bolster our own capabilities. In fact, I think, Bill and Malcolm are here, and they're two of the best. We have assets. Our public safety IT, for example, is second to none. We actually help the county, so the partnership goes two ways on a lot of the things around public safety. But we rolled out a couple examples of how this has gone. We rolled out the new ticketing system, so we actually can track now how long it takes us to resolve end user issues. We rolled that out this year, primarily focusing on computer issues and printer issues and things of that nature. I'm not sure that we do cell phones. I think that's more Malcolm's group, but we're going to get that fixed for you. Okay, but in terms of the traditional IT functions, that has been going very well. We have dedicated staff at the county that are part of the contract that will come over physically and do things. We have, when they're working on things, we have folks still on the 8th floor that will come down. This council approved an internal consolidation, so GIS, information systems, and non-public safety IT are now the Office of Information Technology for the city of Akron. That has been a tremendous help to leverage the bodies we do have. I'm sure they'll tell you in their own in their own budget that we're down at the lowest levels we've ever been in that as well, which is something we need to look at. We're making the biggest area where we're making progress in the partnership with the county is we are starting to purchase together, which is helpful for everybody. So I don't want to steal anybody's thunder, but you know, the process we've been going through with the CAD system, the computer automated dispatch, that's still a process that will be coming before this group, has been tremendous. The fact that Mark Pettit can straddle both the county and the city and see across that plane to figure out where we can partner and where we can save money has been tremendous. I do think, based upon our resources available today, we should really think hard about the future of that traditional IT, just fixing stuff and deploying computers and that everyday stuff, because we could do better even than we're doing now. The progress we made, another example, which John Valley can tell you, we were waiting for over a year to deploy 311 online because of issues relating to to IT. We are now deployed in that. We couldn't have done that without the county's support and guidance. CityWorks is now being further developed. I really feel happy with where we are, but it's still a work in progress. Now the other side, which is how do we leverage assets around technology, I will be blunt with this council. I think I've said it before. The city of Fairlawn took $10 million or more in debt to build out Fairlawn Gig, and they are 1/10 our square footage. It would take us over $70 million to build out a replicable system in Akron for a municipal utility. And then it's a utility, meaning this council and this city have to maintain it, just like a water or a sewer or anything else, for the life of that utility. We happen to enjoy a very good partnership with the city of Fairlawn, and there's opportunities there to potentially partner. We have laid our own fiber for years for different purposes. We lay conduit even without the fiber every time we crack almost every time we crack a road, budget depending. So we do have opportunities short of a full-fledged municipal utility that we could leverage our fiber to generate some revenue. Those are things we're looking at. But the biggest thing that I think around Smart City IoT that we're going to have to face, and the night grant that we're going into year 2 on is going to help us with, and I'd be happy to update the council at an appropriate time, is going to be how are we preparing for the rollout of 5G wireless technology. Unfortunately, the state of Ohio has seen fit to fast-track a piece of legislation that greatly reduces our ability to negotiate our own right-of-way. And so we have been at the forefront of that. Law Director Belfance has been in Columbus at the table fighting through that. We do not support the current legislation that's going through, even though places like the Ohio Municipal League and others do. It's not something that we're happy with. But we want to try and promulgate our own standards so that we're ready. They've been working hard. We're hoping to bring something to this council for consideration this year on that. And when that passes, which will happen probably in the matter of a month, every telecommunication company who has an interest in this neck of the woods is going to want to come to us and negotiate deals and figure out how to start putting stuff up. So we have been trying to stay ahead of that, and that's where the community benefit comes in that Councilwoman Sims was talking about when we went through the telecommunication lease last year. That's where you're talking about, Councilman Neal, we have assets that are valuable to the public. That's where we start to bridge some digital divides. The day-to-day IT stuff in terms of how we deploy computers and how we fix them when something breaks on a printer, I think we could be a heck of a lot more innovative and partner more with the county, not less. But you're absolutely right. We will always want to strengthen the asset side, which is really that how do we leverage our own right-of-way and our own connectivity, which is separate and apart from just everyday IT things. So I want to make sure council gets that there are two conversations. The county is really leading on this day-to-day stuff, but I will tell you Mark Pettit has been an invaluable resource just because he really likes the way we're going on this other conversation that he and I have been engaged with others. And I think that conversation is going to come to a head this year, and we will be working with council to sift through all that entails and all that implies, because no one knows what 5G is going to look like. I mean, eventually fiber will be obsolete. You will get your internet through Wi-Fi repeaters that are out on your street. And that's where this is going. So I think we are trying to be ahead of that curve, and it's definitely a conversation we're going to be having with council this year. I would bet on it.
Very good. No other questions or comments? Oh, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hardy, I guess some of the things that came up, like the expenses of having cell phones and city cars and things like that, where does that show up here? We used to get really detailed books on this stuff. Like, I know Mr. Freeman remembers those days. Used to be line items for almost everything. We don't get that anymore, which is okay, I guess. Nobody really read it. But where do those things show up here under other? It's like things like phones and cars. Where does that come under? Like current expenditures, other? Is that what they come
Okay,
under?
well,
And a lot of that is explained on page 2 of the executive summary that we gave out yesterday. So we kind of outlined the various line items. Now, I don't see cell phones, so cell phones will show up under the utilities line item. So just like your regular phone, the cell phone will show up as a utilities line item. The vehicles will show up in a couple places. One, under insurance, we typically pay about $600 per vehicle for insurance. And then also all of the gas and repairs and things like that will show up down under the interfund transfers category, which is 80 on your sheets. So that's the gas and repair charges.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Hardy, I just, one more thing I would like to request. Mayor's office has, what, 22 employees?
Well,
I pretty much know what the police auditor does. I know what labor relations does. I know what, Lock 3. But in public communications, I mean, is there any way that we can get, and I've asked for this before, I never really got much, if we can get the job description of everybody that's in administration, what they do, and economic development, and probably communications, those 3 departments of the mayor's office, could we get that information?
Sure.
Detailed job description, and who these people are, what they do?
Yeah, and I'd be happy to get you the job descriptions for those. I know that we've disagreed on this in the past, and I just want to be completely upfront. You're not going to get job descriptions written out for cabinet members because our job descriptions are in the charter. Some are very descriptive, and others say we serve at the pleasure of the mayor.
Okay.
Essentially, well, I'll get you a list of all the people, but it's spread out over. So, for example, there are no employees that are charged to something like the Holocaust Memorial Trust. Right. But I just want to be clear, there aren't 22 people that work in the mayor's office. It's the way it's coded. I mean, we have secretarial positions that there are some that work in economic development, others like Charles Brown technically is coded on the mayor's office, but obviously he manages police and fire, so I just want to be clear that it's not.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, not to be too structured and be flexible.
Yeah.
Where the mayor or you can tell somebody, hey, can you go do this if you got time? I think that's a good idea, but maybe a general description. And then I just think that would be a good idea. I just kind of think we should approach budgeting with, first justify what these expenses are for, why do, and when it comes to the cars, if you want to give us the people that get cars, why they have to have one to take home, and why they couldn't get paid mileage. I mean, so I just think we need to justify things when, money's really gotten tight lately, and, people out there are so cynical, not just in Akron, but the whole country. Now, democracy can't function if everybody is so cynical that the politicians are all for themselves. So I think it would be a good idea if we, the politicians, do something like, okay, Mr. Swartzky's idea of paying more for our benefits is a good idea. I don't think we could renegotiate the contracts right away with our bargaining agents, but we can voluntarily do certain things and to make a statement that we're not just in this for ourselves, and I think it would go a long way for democracy in this city.
No, I appreciate your comments. I just want to say a few things. One is that we have, if you look at any city our size, we have a skeleton crew. Each and every one of them provide tremendous value. Some can't be here today, but I will tell you that what I can provide on paper isn't even close to what they provide on a daily basis in service to the city. We have tremendous employees throughout the 1,800 that come to work every day for the city, but the mayor's office, the mayor reduced by 3 cabinet positions, and he tried to do that strategically and lead by example. We've also, that came out of the mayor's office, and we're going to continue to look at that. But everybody that's here, and even the people we had to lay off, provided tremendous value. So it's not about what's extra at this point. It's about cutting, things that really provide value. And The other thing I'll say is that I personally don't disagree on the leading by example, but, you know, I recall for the council's knowledge that the mayor froze his own salary on almost day one. And we definitely, as I said before, everything is on the table to look at how we can streamline. And yes, I can understand where folks would look at cars or different things that cabinet members have had an opportunity to take part in over the years. And from a public relations standpoint, it's easy to look at that.
Right.
And I get that. But we also want to make sure that there's a recognition that some of us are on call 365 days a year, 24/7, and we're all over the place. And so sometimes it's actually cheaper to drive a city car than it is to get mileage reimbursement for all the things we do. Some cases it might not be, and I'm willing to say that. The other thing too is, and Councilman Neal has said this a lot, you look at the comparable salary and benefit packages for the people who work I'm not even talking the private sector, just the nonprofit sector. They're nowhere close. And we don't do it for the money. We do it because we love this city. And we'll continue to try and lead by example. And again, as I said before, this is our plan, but if the revenue doesn't match the plan, we're going to adjust the plan.
Right.
I mean, that's what we're going to do.
Let me just say this here. I don't want to seem like I'm too critical. I think the administration is doing some really good things that don't cost a lot of money, which is smart. I mean, in this kind of environment, you're doing some initiatives that asking for people to volunteer and do things, but I think it's a false comparison between what a CEO at Goodyear makes and what one of the deputy mayors here in Akron makes. I think a better comparison is what our average citizen out there that we represent is making compared to what you guys are making. So that's something that they can relate to. I don't think they can relate to somebody that's making $7 million a year with stock options at Goodyear. So, but that's just the way I feel about it. We, I think, us, the politicians, need to do something in this city, and I think it needs to be done at all levels of government to show people that, you know, we're not just in this for ourselves. We're public servants, and we're willing to sacrifice things that may be perks that we've always gotten in the past that we no longer can afford, things like cars. So I just want to bring up this discussion. I'm not necessarily criticizing you or the administration. Like I said, I think the administration inherited a really, really, really bad economic situation and is doing a pretty good job fighting it.
No, I appreciate that, Councilman, and I definitely respect your position, and I think we can both agree that at the end of the day, we want the best and the brightest that we can get working at the city, myself excluded, and we try and do that. So I respect and understand your position.
Councilwoman Sims.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hardy, on the you may have said this before.
That's all right.
I was working with my technology out
it's
there.
Okay.
On the economic development, the JED, the expenditures, like in 2016, it was $746,000, and then we had budgeted in 17, $572, and we actually spent $886,000. And so currently, our anticipated expenditures is $728,000. Is there something different that's not going to happen this year that happened last year?
So I will look into it more deeply, but essentially, yes. Across the board, there are things in economic development, specifically around the International Business Attraction Program and some of the trade shows that we had been going to that we are not doing this year. So we significantly reduced the amount of trade shows that we had been going to historically as a city going back 10, 15 years. And there were, I can say were now, consultants associated with some of those trade shows that we have not renewed their contracts. So it's not a lot, but that shows up here, and it also shows up in the ADC econ budget. that we have reduced that effort, again, to focus, as the mayor has put it, more locally. And we're also focusing a lot of our efforts on making sure that Bounce is successful. It's its first full year. But that's what you're seeing, essentially, is a reduction in the International Business Attraction Program, a lot of the trade shows and the costs associated with that, as well as consultants that are associated with those trade shows.
So that would have been almost half of it?
It's a significant portion, yeah. I would say it's probably mostly all of the reductions that you see in the Jet Econ and in the ADC was a pulling back strategically of that program, and we did reallocate some of it towards supporting Bounce, which is a more local focused initiative. But for the most part, that's where the reduction is.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Milkovich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hardy, you mentioned the 5G. That's fantastic that you guys are looking for the future. I just want to ask, is the administration look at other technologies that we have today when we purchase things such as vehicles? There's a lot of progressive cities throughout America. They're going down that path, buying hybrid cars, replacing a lot of lights with LEDs. Things that we have now. Is the administration doing that, please?
Yeah, I would definitely leave that to service and safety in terms of that's where the bulk of those purchases are going to be, but I can only speak to the LED as it relates to the Tiger project, for example. We're going to all LED lights down there whenever possible. Obviously, you have to work with First Energy on that, but yes, those are things we look at. I can only speak to the lighting side of it.
Mr. Neal?
Mr. Swirsky, I'll defer to Mr. Swirsky.
Following up on his,
Okay, I'm sorry, Mr.
well, you're looking. What about purchases of cars? I know we have some plan for the future. Are we looking at hybrid cars for the safety forces?
I can get back to you on that. I don't have an answer on that. It might be better asked of, like I say, I know safety is obviously going to be a large purchaser of vehicles, and then service. Those are the two that probably have the most ability to do replacement vehicles this year, so I would definitely ask them, but I don't know of a policy that we have, unless I'm missing it.
Do we currently have some employees with hybrid cars?
Yes, absolutely. We have employees with electric cars. I don't know, but I will get that for you.
That would be good.
Okay.
And I think if we're at the point now where we're going to be buying new cars, I mean, I know sometimes they're more expensive, but if they can be at competitive prices. And we had somebody in purchasing, she was putting on a green fair at one point. We had the green fair, and she had a list of sources for buying green products, and she might be helpful, at least a starting point. And I think even who had cars, hybrid cars, I think she...
Correct, that's something that we participate in each summer. I believe it was at Cascade Plaza last summer.
Right. Yeah. Right, but she has a good list.
Okay.
Councilman, I'll get you a percentage of our fleet and the percentage that's hybrid or electronic.
Right, it'd be nice to set some goals on how we...
Sure.
Where we're going to be in a year or two, or just as we're doing with the LED lighting. Our vehicles would be a good bridge for the youth too. If the police are driving cars that are hybrid, be a nice little message that we're out there with.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Russ. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you taking the questions. Just wanted to ask one more thing. I know we've asked a lot of things, and you're going to get back with us. If we can get those well enough in time for us to be able to review those questions before it's time to finalize the budget. And then Councilman Swirsky mentioned, us looking at our health care. We know that we've had members of our family, I want to put it like that, who have retired, who have come down and shared the hardship that's been put on them. I understand that there are some things that are tied up in, a court case or whatnot, but there's some information that we've asked for in regards to cost factors that was initiated us making the initial decision, meaning we said we couldn't afford it. But we haven't gotten those actual numbers. I'm asking now so that I think we talk about healthcare on Thursday. If we could just have those numbers that were looked at on what the cost was, what per spouse and whatnot, we have to, either we can or we can't, none of us want to be in this position, but, it's funny, you're around long enough and you don't need to reference history because you were a part of that story. And I remember being a part of some of those conversations. And so, without going on any further, if we could just have the data that was used to bring us to that decision so that as a council, we can look at it again and know, because we can't even make our present decision, in my opinion, without looking at that last decision, because we did say that we were going to review our position and see where we could be. And I know that's a difficult conversation, but if we can have those numbers so that on that day we'll have that information, and then when it comes time for us to make our overall operating budget decision, council can be in the best position to make that decision.
Sure. I'll obviously let Director Rice and Director Miller-Dawson deal with that in detail, but I can say that our numbers haven't fundamentally changed from that very first presentation we made to council to consider the changes. And I mean, you can look at the budget and see that our capabilities haven't improved, and we just really got the program underway. And so it's from my perspective, I feel comfortable saying that the status that we presented in terms of why the change needed to occur and why council agreed that the change needed to occur, those fundamental economics haven't changed. If anything, it's gotten more difficult, but I will let them go through the details.
Director Rice is prepared to respond when he's here.
I appreciate it. I think the challenge is we just never got the numbers. We asked for them, but we never got them. And I do have some, I think the other things appropriately do have to be talked about offline because I know they're sensitive matters.
Understood.
But I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Understood.
Yes.
Mr. Swirsky.
Yeah, I had previously sent an email with a request for some numbers about possible cuts to health care and how that would affect our budget. And I understand, as Ms. Dawson explained to me, that the contract agreement would have to be considered. I mean, those were issues for that. But I think I would please like those questions answered and sent back to us in an email so that we can all consider that. And maybe that's kind of the big picture issues, but and if it's not appropriate in terms of the timing yet, but it would still, I would like to get this on the table for the future, for when it is appropriate.
I believe that email was sent to Director Rice, and I never got it. You were going to re-forward it to me, so I did not get the email.
And he didn't share it with you?
Not the specific email, no.
Okay, but I'll resend it again because I thought I put both of you on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So should members, should we expect the response to come from Mr. Rice?
Yes, he is over medical benefits.
Okay. Mr. Hardy, thank you. Thank you very much. I know, stewardship is necessary when there's a lot of money. Stewardship is necessary when there's not enough money. So we appreciate your commitment. And,
certainly.
And, I mean, we know every 3 or 4 times a year we do appropriations and we rearrange, and we just appreciate the questions were asked here today, and I've jotted down a few things, and we'll watch for responses from that, but thank you very much. Any closing remarks you'd like to make?
No, Mr. Chair, I have my 3 biggies that I have to get back to the group, so I will get that done.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We're going to hear from...
Yeah, I'd just like to add one thing. City council people don't have a job description either. Maybe we should have it. We know what we do? Okay. I don't think they'd give us that answer either.
Mr. Keith, I believe you're up. Yeah, if you so we can face you that way. That'd be good.
Yeah.
Last year I was
Yeah.
in Tampa, took a car, it was fully charged to Tampa to Chesapeake.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Drove it back.
I thought it felt a little dim in
Car
there.
gas
Yeah.
before, so I had to
Yeah.
Tony, hold on. 1 gallon of gas. It's like
Mr. Chairman, if I could, before we get started with City Council, I would like to introduce the audit and budget staff that is responsible for the preparation of the 180-page plus document that you have in front of you. So we have a number of budget analysts within our audit budget division.
Going to ask for order, if we could, please. Thank you.
And I'd like to introduce them. Standing closest to the door is Tony White. Next to him is Liz Clow, Teresa Klein, and Michael Wheeler.
Thank you for your work. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and of course, next to me is the audit and budget manager, Cindy Donnell.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Keith.
Any questions? I mean, our budget is very slim and thin. I could go over some of the accomplishments from last year if you want me to, but supposedly that's online somewhere.
Let's take a look here. He's got this but doesn't have any numbers.
President Somerville is going to handle the council side, and I'll handle the clerk side.
But before you go to the council side, Chair, I did have some things I will go through.
Okay. Just looking here for a moment. Okay, would you like to proceed? Oh,
Are we done with the clerk side?
If there's questions, shout. Yep, I need you to shout out.
There's questions after that, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Well, to Mr. Kilby's point, we used to get the detailed line items.
Correct.
Because like under what it says for legislative clerk of council, what are the utilities expenses? I'm assuming are the cell phones. Okay. The interfund service charges are. What is that all made up of?
Okay, so the interfund service charges under, let me make sure I'm under the clerks here. Yes, I am. Yeah, so we do have a vehicle, we have storeroom supplies, and a lot of that is advertising for the ordinances that are published in the Beacon Journal. That all goes through the storeroom, so that's the bulk of those costs. We have some interfund communication service charges, so if there's any wiring or things like that in the council chambers that their communications division has to do, there's a chargeback for that. And then there's also all departments that have full-time employees, there was a chargeback to our IT fund in order to fund both the IT staff and then a number of the applications that benefit the city as a whole, like our PeopleSoft payroll application and Banner, which is our accounting application.
Okay, thank you. If we can, I know you've provided for us in the past, if we still could get, even though you've explained it, the more detailed.
The line item detail, yes, we can do that.
Thank you.
Questions or comments? Mr. Kilby?
Oh, yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fricker?
Yes.
I heard you say something about, under the clerk's department, the advertising for legal notices. What does that come under?
That'll come under the 80 interfund service charges, because our storeroom actually purchases they have a contract with the Beacon Journal for all the publishing of, there's more than just council that does that. Our engineering bureau publishes bid specs for projects and things like that. So those are done on a chargeback basis.
So this $30,850 we're expending for 2018, is that mostly going to the Beacon Journal?
There's 20,000 of that is in the interfund storeroom supplies charge line.
Okay. I know this has probably come up in the past. Is there anything, any other, I know it has to be published in a a newspaper that's got general circulation?
That has circulation,
Is there
correct.
anything
We
other than the
have
Beacon
looked
Journal
at, we
could
have
use?
looked at alternatives in some cases, and
West Side Leader.
publishing things in the Akron Legal News and things like that, so that has all been looked at. I believe I was informed by people within the clerk's office that in some cases it's actually more expensive to publish in the Akron Legal News than it is in the Beacon, so.
There probably are some people who look at that stuff, because I've gotten calls about things that were in the paper. I never read it, but I have gotten calls from people that do. So, all right, thanks.
Anything for Margot?
Oh. Anything else for Mr. Keith? Ms. Somerville, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. We'll kind of go through what we have before us, and I'll do the best to answer questions, but of course, Mr. Fricker here is the expert. Of course, labor, obviously that's salaries of our council members. Our fringe benefits, we've already talked a little bit about. Of course, that is health care benefits. Where you see utility expenses, that's cell phones, 13 cell phones for all of council members.
What about the tablets?
Oh, wait, hold on one second. Let me go back, because I just messed up. I messed up. So current expenditures actually is the carpet that you see, that we're on right now, the very nice carpet. We also have our travel in current expenditures. So in 2017, we budgeted $40,000 for travel. In 2018, we're budgeting the same amount, $40,000 for travel.
Now, I know travel was a big discussion last year. Where were we last year compared to the year before? Because when I look at the overall 2000 current expenditures for actual expenditures for 2017, they're half of what they were for 2016. So again, if we can get that.
Right, I can give you a little bit of an update on that. So last year, in the travel category, we spent about almost $16,000. Now, I will say that I believe that some of the travels that were done late in the year, some of those charges actually hit into 2018. So a small amount of that kind of carried over.
We spent 16, 17, $20,000, and we had budgeted 40.
Correct. Yeah, the year before, you spent about 32,000.
So we've never been over budget.
I can only speak for the last 2 years because that's what's showing up here, but.
I think to Mr. Kilby's point, because there are expenses and then there are investments. But we need to be able to show, just like the administration needs to be able to show, council needs to be able to show, when we travel, what is the return on that travel? I mean, we have people come to our council chambers from all over the country. Last gentleman, and I shared with my council member, Milkovich, how envious I was of him, because he was able to actually have a conversation in the gentleman's native language. But he came here to find out how to stimulate his country's economy. He came all the way across the pond to find that out. I know that this council has proposed, from exposure that we've had of traveling, we have proposed ideas to improve our neighborhoods and to stimulate development. We need to see where those things come into fruition. Because if not, some people may think it is just an expense. But because one I want to come to is one that we mentioned about, and it's probably in this current expenditures, is, we've asked before, how much do we spend on postage? Can we cut that by having a more integrated web-based platform to interact with and communicate with our residents? The other one was last year we talked about, at first we had talked about it being a tool for the finance department, but it's more so a tool for us, so that we can understand the budget better and what the different budget, the impact to the budget when we take dollars from one and put it somewhere else. And that was with the program that was free to us. which was Balancing Act. There's other ones. There's Open Government, there's Balancing Act, but that program was free for us, and it would give us an opportunity to follow each decision we make throughout the year, and make decisions midterm, but more importantly, have a better understanding as we're going through the budget right now. So, Madam President, to colleagues on council, we said last, I think it came in July, when it was proposed. Everybody thought it was a good idea, but that just wasn't the right time at that time. I'd like for us, especially looking at what our expenses are, and it's well within our budget, to look at, especially since initially it's free, look at putting the budget online. At first, we talked about it as a tool for the finance department, but more so as a tool for us as council. And I just use as an example, if our colleagues on the state level can send us links to interact and give budgetary comments and suggestions on how to use the state's budget, I'm sure we can do that with our residents. And especially, I don't know if any of you, but residents are asking questions already, you know, about the 2%, since it's not all going towards capital improvements. And we're talking about adding staffing already and questions on there. So it's a tool that can, one, educate us, help us communicate with our residents. So I'm hoping, looking at this budget and seeing how we're well within line with our expenditures, that we at least take advantage of the free component to see if we like it. And then I think the overall expense was no more than $8,000.
Okay. Thank you so much. And to Councilman Neal's point, we were able to kind of tell that we've saved money in terms of copying just by using, you know, our iPads, you know, not making so many copies for all council members with legislation. Also, in terms of saving postage, I know Sarah and Holly have let me know that they're doing more communication through email in terms of communicating with residents and things of that nature as well, too. So seeing a cost savings there. I'm just going to go through, and then you guys can ask questions, okay, if that's okay. Also, in current expenditures, the one thing that I wanted to talk about was My Neighborhood, Our Akron grant. If you remember, we had that now. It's been a couple years we've had the program, I do believe. In the last 2 years, we've always had budgeted in our budget $100,000 for that grant program. Last year, I think only $11,000 roughly was spent out of that program. And so included in this current expenditure, we actually have reduced that $100,000 down to $40,000. So that's a little more than 3 times what was spent last year.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this goes back to the question. I've got 2 grants under the My Neighborhood, Our Akron.
Speaking to the mic, sir.
I have 2 grants under the My Neighborhood, Our Akron. And all due respect, Mr. Fricker, Ms. Miller-Dawson, you think we grill you here. That one of my grants came through in October. I am still waiting for the Buchtel's boys basketball team to receive their $1,000 because of the questions regarding if they want every I dotted and T crossed before they release that $1,000. And this was a program that was published in the paper, well documented, and the money is going to another city organization, so to speak. I say that to say this. That program, the My Neighborhood, Our Akron program, I think we can better invest in our neighborhoods, especially since that's one of the mayor's main initiatives, is neighborhood investment. We created that program because we always ask our neighborhood organizations to volunteer, to get involved and help improve the community, but we never provide them with any resources. I mean, the maximum of that grant is $1,000. For those who communities have used it, I can tell you I've benefited from it. And that little bit of seed money helps organizations. My question is this. Now, we want to reduce it to $40,000.
That's correct.
Okay, why? And I asked that why because of this. Technically, that grant's been around for 3 years. I don't think we've ever used more than 20%.
It's in current expenditures.
All right. And one thing I'll point out is previously that was budgeted under the Department of Neighborhoods. So, but the 40,000 for this year is reflected in the council budget.
Okay. Yeah, thank you because that throws off the other numbers from in the past. That's why we need that expanded sheet so we can see what it's. But
Yeah.
I say that to say this: if we were keeping things in the budget line item, that would mean that technically there was close to $250,000, almost about $250,000 that would still be sitting there for my neighborhood or Akron. But that money went back to the general fund, correct?
It was just never spent.
Okay.
So, yes, it was never appropriated out of the, it was appropriated, but it was never spent out of the general
So
fund.
basically, it goes back to the general fund, correct?
Correct, it was never
Okay.
spent out of the general fund.
So my question, and I don't know how the other members of council feel, is why, when our plan is to, our plan and the mayor's plan is to enhance neighborhood engagement. And if we don't spend that money, it's not like it stays here, it goes back into the operating, the general fund. Why would we limit our ability for neighborhood engagement? I could see if that money was still sitting there and we had the ability to use it for neighborhoods, which technically I think that's the way it should stay. But I mean, you're taking away the only tool that we have to engage residents. And if every council person used it, you would limit it to $4,000.
If every council member what?
If every council person used it, well, it would be less than 4,000 because our at-large people would do some programs. We have 10 wards. That's $4,000.
But over 3 years, every council member hasn't used it, only
Correct.
3 or 4.
Correct, but nobody's penalized because that money goes back to the general fund.
But keep in mind, especially last year when we had a year of negative income tax growth, you know, to the extent that we did not spend those funds on the My Neighborhood Our Akron program, those funds were available to make up for some of the shortfall that we had in the income tax revenues that we did not collect, and therefore paid for police officers and firefighters.
Okay, so we're talking about $80,000, and this is why I have a problem with it. Because I've been on council floor for the longest. We're spending $140,000 to paint fire hydrants. And it's been documented, it's been proven that we could do that for less than $40,000. Last year, the statement came in from Stowe where they were using special needs children. There was a special article, you know, in the paper to show that. Asked the administration to come back to talk to them. We didn't get any information, so I called Stowe's service department administration to find out. Stowe loves the program. Okay, for those who have questions about if we're staying on task, this is on task. Because, excuse me, sir, it is because we're talking about taking money out of residents' hands that can be used to improve neighborhoods. We're talking about wanting to save money, and we have not addressed the program where we're spending $100,000 to paint fire hydrants. We could do it less than $40,000. So if you want to take money, let's start there. What started this program, if you remember, we get $100,000 to $150,000 back in credit card rebates. Council does not control where that money goes. That was like an agreement, okay, we'll dedicate some money so that residents have something to work with. And there's more things that we can look at when it comes to savings.
I think maybe, and everything you're saying is legitimate, it's valid. So, the things that Mr. Neal's saying, If you can, I mean, if those can be, yes.
If I can just respond to some of the things that Councilman Neal is saying. The one thing I want you to always remember we just said last year only $11,000 was spent for My Neighborhood, My Akron. So if in fact in 2018, we get every council member out there pushing this grant and we get more requests than $40,000, we could always come back and do a budget amendment to make that adjustment. You know, so just want to kind of keep that in mind. I think we maybe need to look at the program, see if there's some opportunities to tweak the program, or see if maybe we need to do a better job of maybe getting the word out, advertising the program. That's a good idea. You know, so just some ideas to think about.
Let me share this with you. First, we know if you talk to Helen Tomic with the Neighborhood Partnership Grant, it takes 3 to 4 years to get a program up and running. That's the first thing. The second thing is, if you don't budget for it, it won't be there. Again, if we budget for it, and we don't use it, then it's there to be used for other things. If we go out and if every department did that, didn't budget for it, but say, hey, you know, if you go over budget, we'll just reappropriate, that's when you get into budget troubles. So, you know, again, if this council wants to do that, I've mentioned 2 things. The credit card rebates, we don't talk about those. And again, we're spending more than $120,000 a year that we don't have to paint fire hydrants.
What department does that come under? The fire?
Service department.
Then we just need to discuss that when we get to service.
Yeah, I mean, we can, but I'm saying, I know we're not going to finalize the budget now, but there's no way that I can justify taking money out of residents' hands to improve our neighborhoods when that's part of our initiative and that's part of the mayor's initiative. When we're paying somebody $120,000, $140,000 to paint fire hydrants, we can work with children with TANF fund dollars, which, like Stowe did, and do it for less, a lot less.
Okay, Ms. Samples?
I'm fine. So I have a question about, I think more or less, probably the way the applications come in and how they're handled. I think we have to start there. I have residents who turn them in and then they are disqualified for whatever reason. I think that's where a lot of the issues are coming from. I think we need to have a better understanding as to who's reviewing them and who's making decisions, because quite honestly, it's hard for someone who does not live in Ward 5 to make a decision about Ward 5 when they're not there. And I think we need to start there. I have a couple people who were denied that I just knew would be approved. So I think starting there, seeing how many applications actually have come in and been denied versus the ones that have been approved, so we can sort of kind of get an idea of actually how many are actually coming in financially wise that will go out before, and then base a cut off of that. But I have residents who do all the time. They send them in and they're denied. I've got a resident right now that turned us in back in June and nothing has happened. So I think we need to start with that process. The process, I think it needs to be tweaked a little bit.
Absolutely. So again, just want to echo again my previous statement that we need to really look at the program, because even in my ward, same exact thing. I know there's a lot of limits in terms of how the money can be used, certain things like that's tripping up a lot of people who want to get access to the funds. So I please welcome all council for us to really look at this so we can make it a more effective program.
Mr. Fusco?
I just recommend doing that on a separate discussion day and time. The one thing that I've always done and found useful is working with planning in terms of the neighborhood partnership funding. I have always, all organizations that I've worked with over the years, I've always kind of guided them in that direction, and of course that's been around for a while. And there's been a couple years whereas they barely had enough applications to fund. I mean, they had more, they had more money than, people that were, so the same situation somewhat, but the thing of it is, and that's the funding for neighborhood organizations that I've found that's been beneficial. And I know this has got a couple different nuances, but still though, I just recommend this conversation for another day.
All right, Ms. Mobian, thank you.
And I think it's the same thing that Mr. Fusco's just said, but it sounds like the president has already made a compromise, at least for now. Look at what we have and then use that. If we need to have more, it would be available, but to review the program, how it's currently operating, and make some recommendations. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like that would be a good place to start.
Exactly.
Mr. Swirsky.
I agree with what's been said about reviewing the whole process, and I am comfortable that it would take tripling the amount of money that's requested to get close to the 40,000. So I'm comfortable that there's a lot of cushion there while we're tweaking it and making it something more accessible. And we do have to keep in mind, before we think we're taking money out of people's hands or something, that we do have a neighborhood partnership program which has, I don't know, it's just like amazing number of neighborhood groups which take that opportunity and use them in a way that is it's accessible, and the people who get those funds have to be accountable, and I think it's a good program that we already do have. And if we find something, some nuances that need to be addressed, okay, but let's just keep that in mind. We do have a neighborhood partnership program.
Mr. Kilby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Getting back to the subject at hand, okay, I got a question. I don't know, it's either Bob or Margot. The copy machine that we have in there, who pays for that? The clerk's office? Right. Do you lease it or do we own it?
I think, is it leased, purchased?
I think we own that. Do we?
Okay, so there's no expense here for that since we already own it, or we?
There's a maintenance contract, as most copiers within the city have.
Okay, all right, so getting back to, I think Margot brought this up, we're saving money. We've had these for what, about a year now? These tablets, how long we had these, about a year, I guess? Okay, so how much money are we saving, and who saves the money, the clerk's office or the council, on paper? How much, do we have any idea how much we've saved on paper since we don't get the legislation? I mean,
we'd have to dig into the storeroom numbers, but I mean, certainly the reduction in paper usage, you know, there is a tangible benefit to doing that.
So that would go to the councils or the clerk?
It's probably on.
Who pays for paper?
I'm sure it comes out of the
I think it's on the clerk's side, yeah. I'm looking at the storeroom duplicating, and I don't see anything there on the council side, so I think it's on the clerk's side.
So we are automatically tracking that? I mean, through the copier, does the copier track? We keep track of how many copies we're using?
Oh, yeah. That's
Yeah.
a counter.
The maintenance
so we
contract
could find out how
would-
much we've
yeah.
saved. We could find that out?
Right, and we can also look at the paper orders through the storeroom to see how much paper you're ordering.
Yeah. That'd be nice to get back to us. Probably be a little encouragement for us to keep using them. And,
I would say it would take a long time. Many years of saving paper to pay for these things. It used to be obsolete, but the paper pays for it.
Okay, just one other major thing wanted to kind of mention. If you jump down to our interfund service charge, I do believe we have $10,000 in there for Akron Cares. You know, last year we all voted on giving $10,000 to Akron Cares. We still have $10,000 in Akron Cares again to assist people with water bills.
So where does that money come from? The general fund?
Yes.
Okay, so we have it in our budget. You said 10,000?
10,000.
Was that not done, didn't we pull some money out of travel when we did that?
That was
and
done
put it
in
over-
2017,
Right,
correct.
okay.
So I wanted to say, the problem with a lot of these things is nobody knows about them except a few people. That's why just a few people get it, you know? So I didn't even know we had money to help people. City Council has money in our budget?
Yeah, we voted on that last year, this body.
Voted on it.
This body voted.
So who decides who gets the money? Us? We do?
No.
No.
Akron Cares is a program. Are you familiar with Akron Cares?
Yeah, but they have more than $10,000 a year in their budget, don't they?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, this was just one source
This is one
of
source.
revenue for the Akron Cares program.
Yeah, I know. I just thought maybe we had special fund for it.
We chose last year to take some money out of our travel budget and put it toward Akron Cares. Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This goes back to, you know, us seeing a return on our investment of different things that we do. With the Akron Cares, the challenge is great program. The challenge is the money's usually gone in 48 hours, if that. Now, they've streamlined the process where people are able to apply, put their names in for interviews, but then the money goes through real quick. Now, it was proposed about the, and I can't even think of the name of the program, but where, you know, we try to find out if these people that are applying for this, and this is in line now with United Way's economic empowerment goals, where we find out why are these people having problems. The reality of it is that most of them, their income probably doesn't meet their outcome, but there may be others who have some things that we can correct. What I'd like to see with this money is where we work through the system, like when someone comes and applies for Akron Cares, do we automatically check their home to see if the infrastructure of their sewer and their water, is that infrastructure causing problems? Like, do they have leaks? Are we showing them best practices? Because to just keep coming back and giving somebody charity, it's like, you know, trying to talk to the faith-based community. It makes you feel good to give people food, but you got to know, why are they coming to your church every first of the month or middle of the month to get food? We've got to find a way to correct the problem. Now, council has suggested a few proposals to the administration. We have to wait for them to come back. But what I would like to see is, rather than, it makes us feel good to say we gave $10,000, but we've got to find it in whatever way we can, how can we assist people, if it's making sure we use that indicator to connect them with, if they come to Akron Cares, hopefully right now we're connecting them with the United Ways program. But are we sending out a service group to look at their water bill and say, you know what, you only have 2 people, but your water consumption equals that of a family of 4. If we're not doing that kind of thing, then what we're doing is we're not leveraging ourselves in the best way, I think. So just want to put that out there.
I mean, I like the intention that you have about empowering people rather than just charity. And so maybe something with the financial literacy program that we're going to be doing, they could be somehow connected, at least notified about that. When we're helping them with the bill, there'd be information about, here's places you can go long-term. Is that? Yeah, I think that's good. I don't know if we can do it, but it's good.
I mean, we would have to talk to, you know, whomever runs the program, but those are some good
But we are going to
plans.
keep the 10,000 in for Akron Cares, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Anything
Would
else?
there be any way of increasing that? Is there any place in the budget that some of the council people would like to? Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Sims?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam President, is there funds in there for interns?
Yes, our intern, well, actually, our current intern is in there. Mr. Fricker can say where she's at. I think she's in council, correct, or is she in clerk's budget?
She's in the clerk's budget.
She is in the clerk side, yes.
So how much money do we have allocated for internships?
10,000.
Just 1,000?
I believe it's 10,000. She'll
10,000?
be here. She'll be here till I think the beginning of school, when school ends.
Yeah, we have $8,500.
$8,500. Are there any intentions to put any additional dollars in there for another intern?
Well, she's only been given about 2 or 3 projects from most of council, so I don't know if you want to hire another intern.
No, well, maybe we probably need to identify how you go about accessing her, because I don't know what do you fill out a form? Because I do ask, but they're typically working on someone's stuff. So maybe the process is creating a process.
We can come up with a process
Okay.
on how to do it, but it's not, she's had a lot of free time, put it that way.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Have we always paid our interns? Okay.
I don't know what's the hourly rate, 10 something?
I believe so. Here, let me,
It's up like $10 an hour.
Okay.
But she does these projects. If you guys have something you want, you can tell Sarah or me, and then we'll get it to her as soon as she's done with somebody else's work.
Anything else? Yes, Ms. Samples?
All y'all coughing, oh, don't give me what y'all got. So, quick question for you. After we do an in-depth process as to how My Neighborhood or Akron works, and we come up with a definitive amount of, this is what we're going to use. If there's, we keep talking about there's rollover at the end and it's going back to the general fund, is there a way, and I know it may seem a little ambitious and probably not, taking some of that money and rolling it over to Akron Cares if we're not using it?
I don't see why, this body couldn't vote to do that.
Motion to do that.
I don't know
I
if
was
we
trying
can do
to
that
say
here,
that
but, yeah, so it's just something for us to think about. So at least if if there's a way if we can't, assess and something with our neighborhood through this, My Neighborhood or Akron, at least there's funds there to help them with their water and sewer bills. I think they would really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I mean,
Thank you,
again, do you
Councilman
want me to ask Mr. Valley why people are getting rejected, or do you want a copy of the application, or?
Well,
Maybe he
I
could-
think, and Mr. Clerk, I think what we'll do is, I think council as a body will need to have some conversations and,
Could it-
take
could it
care of
be
that.
at-
Thank you.
Would it be appropriate to have it at the retreat, have a discussion at the retreat? Might be something we can all work on together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just so we can get together and have those conversations as council.
I'll check with him tomorrow why they were rejected.
Mr. Neal.
This is a general question in relation to, like we were speaking about with the My Neighborhood Akron rolling over to the general fund. If we could just get an idea of last year, those things that we had allocated funding for that we didn't do, that rolled back over into the general fund, because this raises a question. We had a $7 million shortfall. What would have happened if everything we had budgeted for, we implemented? Then our shortfall would have been greater potentially if we didn't have stuff rolling back over into the general fund. So if we could just get an idea, how many things roll back over to the general fund? Because I mean, like we used to get a report on departments, and there would be budgeted in there for a position, but there was nobody in that position. But we allocated the money so that during the year, if that position came, that department would have it. Or I know with the capital budget, there were projects. One that comes to mind was, I think it was the apron in Councilman Hoke's ward at one of the fire stations or something that never got done. But it was in the budget, so that if we got around to doing it, it was there. So, those things, again, can get confusing.
Keep in mind that it works both ways.
Yes, sir.
There's things where you go over, and there's things where you underspend.
Trust me, I understand that. But what I'm trying to get a good handle on for us as council collectively is how many projects were funded last year with dollars that were actually budgeted for something else. But because those dollars weren't used, they went back to the general fund, and the money was there to do those.
One other thing I would point out is that we provide our operating divisions the flexibility to move, so council appropriates within 3 categories. We budget at a much finer level down to this line item detail level. We provide our divisions the flexibility to move money around as needed. Now, it all goes through our audit and budget division, but so the divisions themselves are reappropriating, not reappropriating, but reutilizing dollars that they don't need in certain areas and spending them in other areas. So, to some extent, the divisions are doing that themselves.
It's very dynamic.
And I understand that, but I think what it will help, and this is why it would help when we have an actual online tool that we can use, so we can follow what the administration is doing, and we can make suggestions, and we can communicate those out to our constituents, is this. With that, maybe that's, I mean, the reality is that we had a $6-7 million shortfall, and I know you guys are going to get us those numbers so we know exactly what those expenses were connected to. But again, I'm sure you follow my point. We have a budget, and the reason why you have your budget is so that you can stay with some kind of balance. If we would have spent out our budget as expected, then the dollars that went back to the general fund wouldn't have been there. So were those dollars, are they sitting there? Like when you use the example of the water department, it's just money that's showing in the balance, but it's not in the budget? Or were those dollars reappropriated? And I understand if they were reappropriated, but this is a challenge. We never went back in a budget discussion. That's why you get the question from us when someone comes and we spend $300 and something thousand for a 911 call center for Stowe. We were like, well, where'd the money come from? Or when we tear down the rubber bowl, we say, well, where'd the money come from? You know, we're asking where the money comes from. The money may be coming from something because we didn't use it somewhere else.
We've got to get back on point. I apologize.
I understand what you're saying, but...
We need, no,
Okay,
Mr.
well,
Neal, no, we need to get back on point, and
Mr.
I'm going to
Freeman,
go ahead. No.
I understand. Let me just
No,
finish
I'm
with
going to
this.
stop, Mr. Neal. Okay, we've been quite a while here, and I'm afraid and I appreciate, you asked some great questions, but right now we're working with the council budget. Ms. Somerville, is there anything else you have to offer?
No.
Okay, I'm going to ask this of Mr. Fricker. On the Kenmore Salt Fund, if I could have, in the next week or two, you did it for me last year, if I could have detail of income and expense off of that fund.
Okay.
And
For 2017?
Yeah, 16, 17, yes.
Okay.
2 years. And I'm going to take one last question for council, Mrs. Key.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to make note that there is a board for my neighborhood, our Akron. Councilman Neal is on the board along with Councilman Kamer. When a project is not approved, a letter goes out to that person and says explicitly why it was not approved. I have been on that board, as has Councilman Neal, for 3 years now. We continue to tweak it as we go, but I will tell you, if it does not meet the criteria or we do not get the receipts that are needed, these projects are turned down. The law department has become extremely stringent with the requirements, and we are following procedures as prescribed in the grant, and as if you would look at a letter, and I do believe that the council person that this is in, when they are turned down, receives a letter that states exactly why the project was turned down. And I want you to know that I sat here and listened to that, and I will tell you that I do believe that that department does one heck of a job and has committed themselves to making these grants available. And I'm sorry that some people get turned down, but there is criteria to the grants. And I'm sorry, Chairman, that I am off topic, because this is certainly off topic also.
We'll probably talk about this, I would guess, in our retreat.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to ask, who's coming up for safety and communications?
Are we dismissed?
We are dismissed. Thank you very much.
Just you.
Who are we going to be hearing from next? we have? Okay. Okay. I didn't know. All right, Mr. Fricker, I think you're going to be speaking in Mr. Pettit's behalf, or?
Correct. I mean, we do have representatives here from both the Communications Division and from the 911 call center to answer any questions. I'll just briefly talk about the Communications Division. Actually has two funds, so they do have a general fund budget that has 15 employees. And then they also have what's called the Telephone System Rotary Fund, which is a chargeback fund. So our Communications Division does work for the various city departments, and in some cases for outside entities like the county, we actually bill back for those services. So before you have two different budgets. The general fund is reflected on page 3-1, and then the Rotary Fund is on page 3-2.
Questions, comments from committee members or other council members? Oh, I thought we were at 3-1 and 3-2.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Samovian?
when I look at the fund on 03-01, in the labor area, we're projecting almost double what we spent. Can you talk about
Yeah, correct.
that?
So we have appropriated for all of the employees within the safety communications, but depending on the revenues that come in within the Rotary, we potentially would be able to move some of those salary costs over to that fund and cover them there. So, and we were able to do that in 2017.
So we have 15 projected here, employees?
Correct. Yeah.
And last year we had how many?
I believe we're still at 15. Let me double check.
And you took some of the costs from
Yeah,
those
now we
that-
did move, I believe we did move, we originally hired a couple of cable line workers to perform work on the CSO. And those workers were doing that work, but now are in more of a general function. So those workers were moved from the CSO fund back over to the General Fund Communications Division. So it was an increase of 2 employees.
Okay, thank you.
But these were existing employees, I want to point that out. So they were not new hires, they were just existing employees that changed funds.
Is that going to be happening again in the future with CSO and bouncing some folks back and forth?
We really don't have, I believe there's less than a full person still charged to the CSO project fund. We actually had another one in neighborhoods that we moved back this year as well.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay, we can
All right,
proceed.
thank you. And next we have our 911 call center, the safety, police, fire, communications budget. I don't know if Captain Harding wants to briefly give an overview of that budget. We also have Deputy Mayor Brown here.
Good afternoon. I'm going to quickly go over some of the highlights of the highlights that you guys have. In 2017, our Safety Communications Center increased their 911 answer rate within about 10 seconds by 4%. In 2018, their goals is to implement a technician quality assurance program to assist with quality of calls to the communications center. And last but not least, another accomplishment in 2017 is the acquiring and installation of the equipment to enable the body-worn camera system. So with that, we can now move directly into the budget piece. I'm sorry. No, he actually works two different areas. He works in technical services as well. So those are accomplishments for all the areas that that report to him.
I'm going to turn the chair over to Vice Chair Marilyn Keith for a few moments.
Okay, and if there's any questions, the numbers for the 911 call center, and there's two budgets associated with the safety dispatch center. So we have the general fund, which is the bulk of the 911 call takers, and then we also have the enhanced wireless fund, where we receive some money for the state that we can apply towards technology used in the call center.
Mrs. Amobian?
You talked about the quality assurance. You're adding is that a different piece just to see the quality of the work that the workers are doing and to give feedback to them? What are we talking about?
I'll let Captain Harding answer that question.
So we have two civilian supervisors. One of their functions is quality assurance. It's a national standard they're receiving some training on. At that point, they can go back and review 911 calls we've already had come through with the communications technicians to see if there's any room for improvement, and also to document the good work that they do on those.
Okay. So I guess it's a typical quality assurance kind of thing. You have indicators, and then you look to see how people are performing and give them feedback for improvement and that kind of stuff.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Sims.
Thank you, Madam Madam Chair. On the call center, on the safety, on the communications fund, okay, I guess you can skip me. I hate that. So the two funds we're talking about in the communications. Recently, you came before us for, are we talking about hardware and software? Recently, you guys came before us for some software for 911 call center or Airbus. Does that money come out of here? I thought we talked about it coming out of the
Yeah, that money will be coming out of the new issue 4 funds.
That's new issue funds.
For the 5-year, so we just did a 5-year renewal of that contract, and that will be coming out of the issue 4 funds.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilman Neal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the point where you said it'd come out of the issue 4 funds. Now, issue 4, we're going to keep a separate ledger for issue 4 funds.
Correct. There's a separate fund for issue 4.
So, kind of same question. So the expenses for issue 4 are showing up in here, but the dollars for issue 4?
No, the expenses will be showing up in the issue 4 fund. We will cover that today. It'll be part of both police and fire. There will be a page for each one of those related to the new 2017 Police Fire Road Fund.
Okay.
And those expenses will be reflected in those budgets.
So this 911, and the question that was asked about the money that was allocated, that is in this budget, or is that that's in That's in the issue 4 budget.
It's in the issue 4 budget. Yeah.
But the money in the legislation that we passed to pay for the 911 center that we're going to be reimbursed for the Stowe folks, is that in this budget or is that in issue 4?
That is actually in the second page here.
Mr. Fricker, when you find that page, could you
Hold
tell
on
us
one
what page
second,
it
yeah.
is? And then we can all get there.
Yeah, it's not, no, it isn't. It's, you know what, no, it is in the, it's going to be in the Information Technology Capital Fund. It is not here.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Question? Okay. If there are no more questions, we'll move on.
At this point, we should cover the corrections fund, which is part of public safety. What the corrections fund covers is 3 areas. It covers the jail contract with Summit County, it covers the Oriana House contract, and it covers the IBH contract.
I see that on page
page 3-6, yes,
okay,
correct.
3-6, that's okay.
So one of the changes that we want to talk about in this area is that we recently reached a new agreement with the county for the services at the jail, to where we are going to be paying for a lower number of beds and therefore reducing our cost to about $4.2 million annually. Now, because we are paying, some of the bills that we will pay in 2018 are from last year, that full savings won't be reflected in this budget. So we're budgeting about $4,640,000 for the jail contract.
I was just going to comment, the contract is not yet final, but the financial piece that Mr. Fricker spoke of is actual. Our contract with Summit County for jail services expired in February, so it was time to renegotiate. We found that we don't use all of those beds.
Just a moment. I am on the jail capacity committee, and we meet monthly. And what has happened is we were picking up charges of other municipalities. It seemed like when there was an empty bed that we could not fill, these beds were being taken by other municipalities. So we were not in the need that we thought we were in. That's kind of putting it very simplistically, but that's kind of it. Councilman Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To that point that you just raised, so since we know that that's what they were doing, did they make a correction and credit us back, or did they just keep the money?
We were actually receiving some credits for that.
Some equal
I
credit?
believe it was equal. I believe it was fair. But again, we were not using all of the beds. Someone else was in our beds. We realized we did not need the full 115 beds.
Well, what came to my mind when you said that was a thought of ours changing from incarceration to community-based or rehabilitation or treatment, because I know a lot of our, and this is what I would like to find out, I don't know if it's showing up in this budget. Of course, we know many municipalities, their budgets were blown out of proportion because of the number of calls based on opiate epidemics, be it police or fire. As we look into the future, if we can get an understanding of how many of our calls were related to that, what percentage of police calls, what percentage of fire calls, and I say that because as we look at ways to maintain our forces and yet increase our level of service, perhaps we can look at, if a lot of these calls are what I call social-related, health-related type calls, then council can look at, along with the administration, look at other ways to address these, to take the pressure off of police and fire, because the goal is to find out and to be able to engage our communities and service them before we get to that point. So my question is, if we can get an understanding of what number of our calls are related to social service calls, forgive me for not having a better way to describe it, social service calls for folks that, be it mental treatment or a form of addiction.
Councilman Amobian. What page do you want? Okay.
In the general description.
What page are you on, ma'am?
3-6.
Oh, 3-6?
Yeah. In the description of budget, it uses that term.
I must be.
It's like near the top of the page.
Yeah, but that's like, now does that count the call of the officer going out, or is that after the fact? After an officer or the fire department has gone out and then they're sent to a place? I'm talking about the actual, when a car is called out or when the paramedic unit has to go out, if we can get an understanding of the number of those calls that are directly related to that. Not after someone goes out and then we send them to Oriental House or we send them to IDH.
Councilman Neal, we have that information. Councilman Kamer and I are on the EMS board, and we have that for EMS. We have that information to how many of those are, and I'm sure that...
okay, so if we can just have that translated to cost for us, that'd be helpful.
I think the best way is to, as I try to understand what you're saying and make sure I got it right, is for you to email me, and then I'll make sure that I task someone in fire to look at that exactly the way you want it. Okay?
Well, to the chairwoman's point, if we have the number of calls, if we know what it costs for a unit to go out, if we send two officers out, or if we send what it costs for a paramedic unit to go out, if we know the number of calls, we know the cost, we can then come up with that number.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes, if you email me, I'll make sure I task them to take care of that for you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Sims?
I think I missed this button, Mr. Fricker. Maybe you can answer it as a part. On the Rotary, on page, telephone system Rotary, on the current expenditures, although we had some reduction for actual budgeted this year, on the expenditures, they seem, the budget amount, what we anticipate to spend, is double the amount that we expended last year. Is there something significant happening there?
There is. So we have the city is converting over with the county to this new CAD system, and there was a $36,000 study being done right now by the county, which the city has to participate in that cost, and that cost is reflected here.
So what's the CAD study?
The CAD is I'll let Deputy Mayor Brown explain. You can explain it a lot better than I can, but it's the call-taking system or the dispatching.
Okay. No.
Okay, it is what Mr. Fricker said. It's the system that's used to process and dispatch calls for service for fire and EMS. So that $36,000 was allocated because there is a consultant that we use to look for the best product available. So that's what that reflects.
So the $36,000, that's minimal concern. My concern was the expenditures from last year was $480,000. The budgeted expenditures for this year is $838,000. That's nearly a double increase. That justifies only $36,000.
Okay, wait, which page are you on?
So I'm looking at the telephone system Rotary. So it's the chargeback activities. And so if you look at current expenditures, others, when you look at the budgeted amount for 2017 and the anticipated expenditures for 2018, that amount is nearly double. So my question was, what significant is happening there that would make it double?
Yes, so I'm sorry. That is where the Stowe contract is located that we talked about. The equipment that we are purchasing on behalf of Stowe, which we will also receive the corresponding revenue for that as well.
The
So, yeah.
$367,000 is it? Thank you.
Under the corrections, the 16, the 2016 was 8.8, and now it's a 7.8. Just curious what that difference was. Yeah, sure. The, under corrections, in 2016, the actual expenditures was 8.8, and now they're budgeted to be 7.8. Just curious.
Right, so I mean, that
Does that
largely
reflect
reflects a reduction in the Oriana House contract.
Repeat that again,
That largely represents a reduction in the Oriana House, the expenditures to Oriana House.
Okay. All right, questions or comments? We can move along. Yes.
So is the reduction a result of the change in the cycle year for the Oriana contract? I know at one point we were holding up a renewal because we were doing some kind of catch-up with the time period.
I know that was part of it, but we'll have to get back to you with an answer, because that was part of it. We're trying to get it on the same time frame as the counties.
Okay, thank you.
All right, who do we have next?
Fire.
Fire?
Fire.
All right.
Mr. Chair, if I
Yes,
may,
sir.
As they come up, Chief Twigg standing, and then Chief Cowton, and then Chief Tucker, I'm going to share the highlights of the highlights again.
Thank you.
So, in the interest of time, the accomplishments from 2017. I'm sorry? Okay. The increased dedication to provide for long-term health and wellness of members of the fire department by community resources to begin purchasing firefighters a second set of protective gear. And another part of that is the fire department installed 2 fire gear extractors for the removal of carcinogens. Another accomplishment in 2017, the Akron Fire Department installed approximately 1,300 smoke alarms in 400 plus homes. And then also the fire department, with respect to EMS, responded to 40,000 calls for service. And then one of the most important ones that goes throughout the theme of public safety and is a rigorous effort by the fire department and all of our city departments for the building of, new fire stations 2 and 12. Fire stations 2 and 12. And the theme I made a mistake and I wanted to mention is that every single day we're looking at ways where we can increase efficiency. We're looking at ways to reduce expenditures, and we're looking at ways to increase revenue. So with that, Mr. Fricker, I can
Yeah, so the budgeted numbers for the fire department and, the 2 primary ones, and really there's 3 primary ones now, are so we have the fire division in the general fund, we have our EMS division that has its own fund that's funded primarily with property tax and with revenues that we transfer over from the general fund. And now, of course, we have the issue 4 fund that is related to fire. And also, I should add, we have a SAFER grant that is funding 25 firefighters right now.
And last night, I think you gave us the figure of 370 yesterday.
Correct.
So that's the 161, the 209, okay. Questions, comments? Ms. Amobian.
You've told us that issue 4 funds are not in this budget.
No, they are. So the issue 4 fund for fire is on page 4-4.
Oh, 4-4.
Thank you.
So this is where it's reflected with the the new wear? The gears
Correct.
and-
So, you know, the various items, so as we talked about, we are using $1 million for labor costs.
Okay.
We are also, the current expenditures other includes the design fees for the 2 stations that we're looking to rebuild.
Okay.
As well as the fire gear and some technology purchases. And then the capital outlay reflects the actual construction of the station as well as the fire trucks.
You can buy all that with $2.5 million?
That's correct. Now, we're only paying for the construction of the station, and Chief Cow can probably allude to this more than I can. It's going to take place over a couple of years.
Yeah, I think we originally budgeted about 4.3. That was an estimate of how much Station 2 might cost.
Per station?
And yes, for Station number 2. And for 2018, we figured not quite half of the station will be completed, so dividing that total cost for Station 2 up between 2018 and 2019. So the remainder of the cost for the station will go into 2019's budget.
I see. And the fire trucks are not in here either?
No, the fire truck is in there. The 2.5 for capital outlay, that includes 1.6 million for Station number 2 and $900,000 for a new ladder truck.
For what?
For a new ladder truck.
Oh, so there's nothing in here for capital of the building? So this is
I'm
just-
sorry, yes, that capital outlay of 2.5 million, 1.6 million for Station number 2.
That's going to be spread over?
It'll be spread over 2 years.
Oh, that's the station, and the second number you gave was for the fire truck?
Yes. Right.
Okay. I'm
Yes,
sorry,
ma'am.
I didn't hear that. Thank you.
And then, Steve, tell me again, line 61, labor, that is what again? On page 0404? Is
Okay, so that is the issue $4 that we're using to fund firefighters.
Okay.
Firefighter labor costs.
Yeah, that's the issue 4?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Ms. Sims?
Just a follow-up, is that the news class?
That is correct. That's the 21 firefighters that are in class at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Look forward to seeing a couple new stations in town. That's going to be nice.
Thank you very much.
Chief, thank you so much. Thank you very, very much. And Steve, I know we said it yesterday, thanks for taking the issue 4 stuff and showing us that's separate. That helps, because we get asked those questions all the time.
Okay. And our final department this evening is the police department.
Okay, Mr. Chair, again, I'm going to highlight the highlights. 2017, the active shooter response training. We all know that this is a pretty big topic and current event today. A concerted effort was made to train as many people as possible in active response to active shooter situations in 2017. Also, to take care of our public safety folks, peer support and critical incident stress debriefing during the 2017 year took place. And police community relations and our community policing program, 2017 officers participated in 465 community events. A few of the highlighted programs are Run, Hide, Fight, that's for schools and businesses and churches, other places of worship, Safety Town, Prom Promise, and Hidden in Plain Sight. Those are the highlights. And
That, I think it was something, I think it came from you. I saw when I was reading today that use of force is down like 50% from 10 years ago. Did I see that somewhere? Comparing 2007 to 2017.
It was probably in Phil Young's. It was probably with the police auditor's data.
Okay. Okay.
That's great. Okay, with that, if there's any questions about any of the numbers.
Numbers questions?
Start on page 5-1.
Give me a moment here.
Yeah, I'll point out that right now, the police department has two funds that fund salaries. So obviously, the general fund is the bulk of it. And then we also have 12 officers that are charged to the child safety fund, and those are the school resource officers. No, there's, the issue 4 is on page 5-3.
The capital outlay would be the 1.6 million. What will that be primarily?
That's the vehicle fleet.
Okay. How many, do we know how many cruisers are we replacing and with issue 4 money?
Captain Schnee, I have the numbers handy, but we're looking at 50-plus vehicles in the fleet this year.
This year? Well, we haven't done that many vehicles in a year in a long time.
We've cut our expenditures on fleet for the last several years, and this is going to not even get us caught up. But it's good. But it's a good start.
Wow, that's a lot of vehicles in 1 year.
Yeah, we're very short. The cars that we have are overused, but we're going through a process to try to get that money spent this year.
Right.
It's going to be a big task, but
Yeah, and I mean,
one we're happy to undertake.
Because we've been hobbling along on the fleet we have right now, so.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, you say those will be cruisers used by officers?
Those will include cruisers, but they also will include some civilian cars, prisoner wagons, other vehicles in the fleet. So that money will go throughout the entire fleet, but it will include a number of cruisers, which will be those marked cars that answer calls for service.
Okay. And then labor, that's new officers we're bringing on?
It's maintaining the staffing levels that we had.
Okay, that's right. You'd said that yesterday. Okay. Current expenditures other would be?
I think there's some various equipment and things like that. Do you have the issue 4? I mean, I don't have my issue 4 handout with me, so.
There are some expenditures for the body-worn camera program that are included in that. There's also some areas to improve safety in the public-facing areas, and some improvements in several different areas of the police department, like the public area and workspace for the crime scene unit and for the patrol operations area, in particular where the public enters and how they're greeted and the environment when they first come in. And finally, the area that's basically the lobby area for the Detective Bureau. Then there's also some miscellaneous police gear allotment for tactical helmets for the SWAT team and to replace expired body armor, and then to also spend $100,000 towards replacing the tasers in our fleet that are past their prime and out of date for what's recommended for that type of electronic equipment.
Okay. And that was the one question. Everybody have tasers now?
All the patrol officers do, yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. And we want to be able to keep that up with the new hires. And so eliminating the tasers that are at the end of their lifespan and continuing to make regular, smaller purchases every year will help us to be able to maintain that.
And then body cams, where are we at with that?
We're fully deployed on body cams. So I'm happy to say that.
Yeah.
I'm proud and hope to keep that going.
Right. Wonderful. That's great about, we actually, a couple years ago, had some officers come over to the house. We opened up our kitchen and fed officers that came in. And the last crew that came in was about 2:30 in the morning. And my wife had fixed a bunch of food. And I said, where are your tasers? I didn't realize, but that's wonderful news. That's great news. Yeah. So, questions, comments? Ms. Mobian.
Can you talk a little bit about new officers that are hired, and how do we retain them in terms of?
I would love to have a great conversation with you about that, but probably be better to do it offline. So if you want to try to hook up, we can do that, and I can give you as much time as you need.
I mean, is it included in labor costs or no, or what?
The new officers obviously will be budgeted, yes.
Okay.
But the retention piece that you're talking about, I'd love to sit down and talk to you about it.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Chairman.
I'll come back to you and Ms. Samples.
Are the radios for the reserve officers, are they within this budget? What are we doing about radios?
What in particular are you asking about?
So, my understanding, I got an email, I got a response, but it was more or less, the officers who retire and come back to work would have to pay for their own radios?
That would be optional for them. We have radios available for them to sign out and share as a cost-saving measure, and they're certainly welcome to do that. However, there were officers who wanted to have their own radios, and we created an opportunity for them to buy their own radios and get on our system, and that's an option for them. However, they do not have to spend their own money to do their jobs.
So if they decide to they don't want to be reserve officers, or they just keep the radios because they purchased them?
If they would go out of service as a reserve, we would deprogram their radio so it would no longer be functional, and then they could have the radio.
All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Milkovich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With the opiate crisis that we're in, how's the purchase of Narcan funded, and how much was spent last year? Thank you.
Right now, when EMS responds to an opioid event, the hospitals give them 1 for 1. So if they use one, they get one.
So we don't buy any?
Ms. Sims?
Just a couple of things. I know was kind of tied up in there, Captain Shea, on the, what is the expenditures under current expenditures for the body-worn cameras. Is that the cost for retaining data? What is that? And
There's $160,000 that's in the issue 4 budget, and from my understanding, that is to cover what the part of the agreement that for this particular year, because it was broken down by, I believe it's a 5-year with, we have option to go to, I think, 8 years. So it was the share of, to continue to sustain the body-worn program.
so in this current expenditures, this is maintenance of the data that we?
It's the whole agreement, the cameras,
So we got a grant, right, to purchase cameras. How much was that for? 150,000, 200,000? Do you remember?
It was
more than that.
I think it was $335,000.
$335,000. We bought the cameras with that, right?
That helped buy cameras, yes.
So a portion of the cost of the cameras are in here?
This is part of an ongoing cost, so we spread the cost out over a number of years, and that is this year's part of that cost.
So, okay, and that's not a part of the 0.25% in the current expenditures?
I believe
I think there's components both, so we have a body-worn camera grant fund, and there is a component in the issue 4 funds that is directed towards body-worn cameras.
So the one for the 0.25%, that's strictly all 0.25%?
what, on page 5-3?
Page 5-3, but I'm looking at the current expenditures on 5-2. I think it's 5-2. No. So if I'm looking at 5-01, current expenditures, right? That's what we're talking about. And I know Officer Shanae just mentioned that part of the body-worn camera stuff. So I was just wondering what that was that's in here that's not down in the other 0.25%.
That's on page 05-01?
Yes.
The body-worn camera expenditures aren't included in that portion at all. There is a body-worn camera grant fund that was where the budget for the grant was housed.
Right, so there's two places where the body-worn camera expenditures will occur. So they're going to be on 5-3. A portion of the issue 4 funds will be directed towards body-worn cameras. And then there's also the body-worn camera grant fund, which is on page 5-17.
517?
Right.
So I can let this go. So there's nothing on page 5.01 that deals with the body cameras?
No.
I thought that's what you said. So, okay. So
other than there has been some ancillary expenditures that in order to make the program run well, like for example, purchasing software that enables the detectives in that unit to be able to properly redact public record requests, we've made purchases that have come out of either the general fund or possibly one of our special funds that is not specifically from the body-worn camera fund.
My thing rolls back every time sorry. On the labor costs, yesterday I know we talked a little bit about bringing on the maintaining by bringing on those officers that were previously under a grant-funded program.
Correct.
So when I look at the budget, so that's not in this one. That's not in labor. Is it in 5-01?
That's on 5-1, correct. Yeah.
So when I look at the expenditures from 2017, it looks like, if I look at the numbers, that those officers are already in there, where they were already in there in 2017, because it looks at 478 officers, 2.5% increase that would cover that. Roughly
That's employees, not officers.
employees. So the cost is about $2 million?
So last year, the amount that we budgeted for the transfer over to the 2 COPS hiring grants funds was about $2,366,000. We only ended up transferring, I believe it was about 1.9. So that's the differential in cost that was added on to the general fund this year versus what was on the grant fund last year.
Okay, so
And then there's a corresponding drop, if you look at page 5-1, a portion of that drop from the $4,450,000 we spent last year to the $2,739,000 that we have budgeted this year is the reduction of that transfer over to the two grant funds.
Okay, so on the 0.25%, the 1.5 in labor. So is the 1.5 those officers too?
Yes, so now, and actually what's going to happen is the 1.5 is going to be, that's double counted, so to speak. That's going to be transferred into the general fund because that's where the officers are charged. So we're going to take, those issue $4 are going to come in. We're going to transfer $1.5 million over to the general fund to cover these officers that are in, that are being charged on page 5-1.
So they'll go back into?
It'll go back into the general fund.
Not the operating budget, but in the?
No, in the operating budget.
So we're going right back to,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you.
Ms. Mobley, do you have a question? Okay. Any other, Ms. Keith?
Earlier this year, I met along with some of my council colleagues with the mayor, and we discussed the handheld speed cameras that we had, that a number of us council people have been looking at for a couple of years. And there was an issue that was coming before this, the House that might cause us not to use them because all the monies that would be generated had to go to the state, and we would actually be losing money by implementing this particular program. I'm not really sure where we are with that right now. However, I know that speed enforcement has been an issue with a number of council people, and every year we come back and ask, is there money for it, and we're told no. So when we met with the mayor, he said that he would, if it did not pass in the House, if this bill that is presented, which would really be detrimental to us financially to put on a program, a speed enforcement program with radar guns, if that was approved by the House, then he would guarantee us 4 officers that would be used just for speed enforcement in the neighborhoods. Is that anywhere in the budget?
No. No.
Okay. Well, can it be put into the budget because we have, a number of us have to keep coming back and requesting, and this is a request from residents, that there be more speed enforcement in neighborhoods. So is there a place that we can have it put in the budget?
We do have the STEP grant, which is a traffic enforcement grant that is able to be used for problem areas. That is something that some of that could be used in that regard. And we also are still putting together the potential expenditures that we would like to ask for the 2018 JAG grant, and that's something that could be looked at in that, from that funding source as well.
When we have approached this, it has been that a lot of the grant money was used on the highways because because of the speed that people are doing and the accidents are much greater. So once again, I'm just reiterating, we need something in the neighborhoods, and I would like to see that as an item that we can move to, so that I know in the past that what I have heard is that the police have been asked to take it out of their budget but it was never truly budgeted So I think it's necessary that we're able to see something that's budgeted.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
We'll take a look at that.
Thank you.
Mr. Swirsky?
I just want to say amen to what Mrs. Keith was saying. And probably all of us would like that, because there is so much speeding. There's a whole lot of shaking going on. And the newer cars, and it's kind of a strain on what the resources that we already have. And we're always complaining, we're always disappointed that we don't get the electric sign at our corner or whatever. So clearly there's a need to increase the amount of money allocated for it. We'd really appreciate that. I mean,
Ms. Sims?
So I don't know if this is public service or you all, so there's these nice, pretty little signs on Exchange Street, big new signs. They have cameras up there. Is that the police department or is that service? Okay, I'll ask service. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thanks so much. I don't know how you give thanks to the entire force, but let them know, City Council loves them.
Thanks for your time.
You do.
yes, we should have buttons. City Council loves it.
Okay, we are going to adjourn at 5:50. We will meet again tomorrow at 3 p.m. Vice Chair Keith will be commencing the meetings tomorrow because I know I'm going to be late. So thank you so much.